If you think the 80s were cool, subscribe to Geek Legion.
We are talking Legend from 1985, directed by Ridley Scott. An early role for Tom Cruise. This one also stars Tim Curry as his seminal role as the Darkness. So, this is one of these kind of fantasy films, which is probably more of a fairy tale than Sword and Sorcery. But it's one of these films that people often look fondly upon, and I'd seen it a couple of times in the past, but I've now watched the director's cut of the movie, which I hadn't seen before. So we are talking specifically the director's cut in this particular review, but we'll, obviously we'll just touch on the kind of the property as a whole. So this was Ridley Scott's go at a kind of fantasy movie, and it's very much like a sort of a dark Disney-esque kind of landscape with fairies and unicorns and things like this, and it very much feels like it's almost like a kind of mirror reflection of a Disney movie. So what is the story here? So we have this kind of fantasy landscape where a variety of fairy folk live in this kind of forestry area, and the movie focuses on two characters primarily. A princess played by Mia Sara, who is, she's kind of like the good princess that likes to kind of go and talk to the poor people and all the rest of it. And she is friends and potential love interest with this forest boy played by Tom Cruise called Jack, who is a guy that kind of lives in the forest, is one with nature and all the rest of it. And Jack takes the Princess Lili to go and see some unicorns. However, at the same time, we have this evil entity in the form of Darkness, played by Tim Curry, who is a kind of a demonic creature that wants to extinguish daylight so he can live in a perpetual world of night. And he has this kind of like these goblin minions and things like this that he ends up killing one of the unicorns and stealing its horn and sort of kidnapping the other unicorn, along with Princess Lili, where he kind of becomes a little bit obsessed with her. And there's themes of innocence trying to corrupt innocence and things like this. At the same time, then we have Jack, played by Tom Cruise, and a small crew of fairy folk trying to rescue both her and the remaining unicorn. What will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. Right. Let's discuss it. What works in this movie's favour? And let's start with the biggest, the most obvious one, and I think the thing that no one is going to argue about. And that is going to be Tim Curry's Darkness character. Now, for the majority of the film, he's not actually shown in his kind of full glory. It doesn't really show up fully until the kind of the last act of this movie. But he is unrecognisable, and there's absolutely kind of fantastic makeup. And I think this is one of the truly the best depictions of a sort of a demon, a sort of demonic entity, some type of dark deity. He looks fantastic. The makeup here is brilliant. And it's an interesting choice, Tim Curry, when you think of a lot of the roles that he's kind of taken. I think really until this, obviously, is probably most associated with the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And it's hard to imagine. I mean, the role has a campiness to it still, which is why I think Ridley Scott wanted to cast him. But nonetheless, it's such a different visual. And the way Curry sort of plays him is this big, intimidating presence that looks absolutely fantastic. He's just jaw-dropping, even by today's VFX standards. I think this is truly one of the best depictions of a character, and the way he sort of plays him is this kind of, initially before you sort of see him, we sort of see him in the shadows and stuff, and he just kind of seems somewhat of a cookie cutter bad guy, demon wants to take over the world. But once you kind of spending a bit more time with him, he seems almost a little bit more nuanced, and almost like he has this seed of redemption possibly that it could be there, although it's sort of downplayed very much. But I just thought it was good, a good performance. And really the other thing I have to say here is this sort of very over-designed kind of world that this movie takes place in. It's very much a stylistic movie with the kind of the sets very much sort of over-the-top fantasy fairy tale-like. You know, at the beginning of the movie, which really does feel like a Disney film, you know, the air is thick with little kind of like wisps and things like this kind of flying around and bits of kind of pollen and stuff like that. So it gives it this kind of idyllic sort of forestry kind of fantasy feel to it. And then we have these, you know, really sort of soft focus shots of these unicorns galloping around. And it's dreamlike. It's like this ethereal sort of landscape that this kind of movie exists in. The production design here is, you know, is fantastic. I will say, I think it looks like sets. You know, this is a 1985 movie, and it's, with watching it by today's standards, I think it's fair to say a lot of this looks like it's filmed on sets. It doesn't actually look like it's filmed in a natural environment, but it's still, you know, I will still give it the production design here is, you know, it's great. And then, you know, there's a variety of different sets, and when we kind of get into the kind of the evil lair and all of this, it's like, you know, it looks very kind of impressive in its own right, with these kind of this kind of castle-like interior and stuff like that. And then we're gonna get onto the kind of the kind of the costuming and stuff like that for the other characters. And Tom Cruise ends up wearing this kind of golden sort of suit of armor and stuff, and we have a variety of like dwarves and elves and kind of goblins and stuff, which we see in the movie. And there's some interesting kind of work done on some of the kind of these sort of secondary characters. There's like an elf called Gump, and he has this sort of strange sort of antagonistic kind of attitude where he's a good guy, but he's sort of, you almost feel like he's going to flip on the design. It's a very interesting choice in regards to some of the acting here, and they've obviously cast someone who's relatively young, but they come across as quite old. It's quite interesting. And then he sort of comes across as being a sort of a little bit aggressive in a way, but still a good like guy. It's a hard thing to describe really, but I found him quite an interesting sort of character in some respects. The way he's kind of portrayed, giving you this kind of like a good character, but with maybe a little bit of a chaotic element to him. So that you know, that is somewhat interesting. I think the music's, you know, decent on this one. So that there's a lot to be said on the technical elements here. And again, Tim Curry's performance as the Darkness, I think is you know, it's very good. This director's cut, you know, the more time is given to some of the scenes and stuff like this. Do I think it's noticeably different from and better than the original or theatrical cut? I have to be honest with you, not especially, and I'll come on to why in a minute. That might be controversial, and what I'm going to say next I probably think is going to be controversial, because let's move on to what I didn't like about this movie, and I don't like this movie. So yes, I can appreciate the art, the artistic design, that the kind of the production and everything like that. I think is very, very good for the most part, but I don't like this movie. And I don't think the director's cut is really especially better than the theatrical cut. I think this movie still has pacing issues, and I think this movie the theatrical cut had pacing issues. I think this cut has pacing issues. And let me break it down a little bit in a little bit more detail as to why I had some problems with this movie. Number one, I think the acting is very good. Tom Cruise isn't very good in this movie. It's obviously an early role. Mia Sara is not very good in this movie, and I think her character, as well as not being particularly well acted, is actually a bit of a dick, if I'm honest. I mean, she's meant to be this personification of innocence and virtue, but I gotta say she comes across as a little bit selfish, a little bit of a, I don't know. I mean, she kind of walks into someone's house and starts eating their food, and it's kind of like, well, I'm a princess and stuff like this. And I guess in 1985 it might have been like, oh, this is, but now it comes across as she's just kind of rude, to be honest. And, you know, she's kind of warned not to go and touch unicorns, but she does. So there's nothing particularly endearing about her character, I've got to say. And I don't think her acting is particularly solid. And then we could have come across the kind of the supporting characters, not including, I mean, there's like Meg, who is this sort of swamp witch, I think is quite good, okay. But a lot of these other characters seem very like peripheral. They don't really feel like they add much to the movie, and some of the performances are just kind of like some air on the sort of like too comedic, too sort of like lampoonish or spoofy, and some are just not very good acting. So the acting, I think, and some of the character work here is poor. I don't think that a lot of the character work here overall is quite poor, I've got to say, and I think it's only a couple of the sort of characters that have less screen time, and I'll include Darkness in that, actually feel like a little bit more fleshed out. I think our main protagonists especially are pretty cardboard characters in regards to actually being fleshed out, or 3D characters and stuff like this. So the characters are quite poor. So the first act of the movie feels like Disney's thrown all up over it. And I know this is going to be, in a way, going to be a dark mirror reflection of a Disney movie. But man, there is so much sort of just milling around, just kind of like, feel like the movie's just not going anywhere. And then this, you know, the first third of this movie was tough to sit through, I'm not going to lie. And I think this movie struggles throughout the movie like that, in patches. I mean, there's elements here where you feel like something's coming on, but then we'll just spend ages kind of like, treading water. And then even towards the end when we could see Darkness, I mean, it kind of picks up now, but there's even elements in those scenes where I feel the movie just treads water. I think it needed to pare down some of the kind of the peripheral characters. Like I said, I think some of these just don't feel like they really have anything to do, and we spend time with them doing their comedy bits. It's just sort of not necessary. There's too much time to spend frolicking around in the woods, looking at the kind of like the pretty scenery. And it is pretty, but it's just like, okay, this movie is just meandering all over the place. And as I kind of mentioned, as much as I like the kind of the presentation, the technical elements here, I do think it still feels somewhat artificial. This never really feels like a natural environment. And I guess it's some of a situation where there is style over substance in this movie, because the plot is very basic. It's very much like a kind of like a movie which is over-designed in many ways, to the point where I don't think it looks artificial. It looks like a movie set. And as pretty and as impressive it is, it doesn't look real. It looks like, you know, it looks fake. And then it's just kind of like, just has real issues in regards to its storytelling narrative. I mean, Ridley Scott has a mixed record. Let me just say that. I mean, when he hits, he hits. But this one, to me, wasn't a hit. I didn't really like this movie back when I saw it, and I don't really like it now after I've watched the director's cut. Sure, the director's cut might give you a little bit more sort of context, but the movie, I think, it exacerbates some of the pacing issues, if I'm completely honest with you. And even in the shorter theatrical cut, that still was an issue. But here, I think it's possibly even worse. Now, how to rate this one? Honestly, I feel like giving this a below average mark, because I just think the elements of the story here are poor. But I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 10 purely for the production design. And there you go. That still might be a low mark for many of you. I appreciate this is a beloved movie by some, but for me it was a tough watch. And as much as I like images of this movie and sequences on their own, overall it's a little bit of a movie I think I would never probably want to watch again. So yeah, 5 out of 10 for me. What were your thoughts? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.